Hi, everyone. My name is Selenia Marquardt, and I am the Adult Literacy Librarian with LA County Library, and I want to welcome you all to tonight's virtual program, Intro to AI Basics. Okay, and I'll go ahead and start with the recital of the land acknowledgement. So the County of Los Angeles recognizes that we occupy land originally and still inhabited and cared for by the Tongva, Tataviam, Serrano, Kizh, Chumash peoples. We honor and pay respect to their elders and descendants, past, present, emerging, as they continue their stewardship of these lands and waters. We acknowledge that settler colonization resulted in land seizure, disease, subjugation, slavery, relocation, broken promises, genocide, and trauma. This acknowledgement demonstrates our responsibility and commitment to truth, healing, reconciliation, and to elevating the stories, culture, and community of the original inhabitants of Los Angeles County. We are grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on these ancestral lands. We are dedicated to growing and sustaining relationships with Native peoples and local tribal governments, including, in no particular order, the Fernandeño Tataviam Band of Mission Indians, Gabrielino Tongva Indians of California Tribal Council, Gabrielino Tongva San Gabriel Band of Mission Indians, Gabrieleño Band of Mission Indians, Kizh Nation, San Manuel Band of Mission Indians, San Fernando Band of Mission Indians. To learn more about the First Peoples of Los Angeles County, please visit the Los Angeles City County Native American Indian Commission website at lanic.lacounty.gov. Okay, and now I want to introduce you all to our speaker for tonight's program, Julian Zamora. He is the Adult Literacy Librarian, Coordinator with LA County Library.
All right. Thank you so much, Selenia, for that introduction. And thank you to all of you for attending this late afternoon's program of Introduction to AI Concepts. Before we start, I do want to say that, we took into consideration this program as a basic. So this presentation will be pretty basic and as if you have no knowledge of what AI is. So if you are a little advanced, not to worry. We will be going and doing more programs in the future, and more intermediate ones. So this is what we're going to be covering today. As Selena mentioned, this is being recorded, so we will be sending this recording out in the next few days. Feel free to take notes, but you don't have to. So we will be covering in the news, AI in the news. What is AI? How does AI work? How it's in our lives, the types of AI models, examples of AI models, which I'm sure all of you have heard already. We will provide you with some library resources for extra studying and learning, and of course, some questions at the end. I do have some of my colleagues here who will be helping me with the questions. Feel free to post your question in the chat or Q&A, and we'll do our best. But again, we are not experts. We are librarians, so we are, tasked with disseminating information that we know of. All right, let's get started. In the news. So here are some headlines that, I got from online about AI. Right. Here you can see China's drive towards self-reliance in artificial intelligence, from chips to large language models, which we'll be going over. I will be going over that today. You see, at the bottom, our administration, Trump's plan to give AI developers a free hand in developing and enhancing AI here as a nation. You can also see something more down to earth. You can kind of see another headline: AI bots swarm library culture heritage sites, causing slowdowns and crashes. So, what does this all mean? We all have an idea of what AI is. So before we get into that, we're going to go back in history and kind of define where it came from, right? So the first term was coined by John McCarthy in 1956, and at a conference at Dartmouth College. John McCarthy was a computer and cognitive scientist. And in this conference, the world's leading thinkers in computing explored the possibility of creating machines that could simulate human intelligence. So in the chat, I just want all of you to put down, what comes to mind when you think of AI, right? Um, what we know is that AI is technology that allows computers to mimic or simulate human learning, comprehension, reasoning, creativity, autonomy, and problem solving. Okay, I see some answers coming in. People are thinking Siri, robots, ChatGPT, Asimov, okay, iRobot. Okay, see, you guys already know. Okay, yeah, same thing with me when I first thought about AI and this presentation. The first thing that came to mind was robots in film and television. Right. I see some people saying fake news, videos on YouTube, right? There's so much content being created using AI, email, auto replies, Skynet. Oh, going back, right? Going back to Terminator. I like that. Enhanced learning tools. Okay, great. Great. So all, great answers. All these do, um, you know, talk about AI and not only of what we think and what our culture thinks of AI, but what it is and how it's applied, now, and that's what I want to go over today, right? So AI systems and how does it work, right? We know that um, systems and programs and algorithms, they can analyze data, they generally find patterns, and they make predictions or suggestions based on those patterns and data. So essentially, they have been made to advance our technology that we've created, right? We created AI, by we I mean humans, and we ask the system or the algorithm, the programs to apply this technology in ways that we could never process and definitely process that data at a much faster pace, right? And also handle large, very large quantities of data points, right? Um, so that's what you think of how AI works, right? I'm not going to go too deep into that. You can, right? That's up to your learning. But for the purposes of this presentation, that's what we're going to think of what they can do, right? A lot of you already mentioned, where do we see AI in our lives today, right? We see this in our search engines, right? When you're already Googling, right? Something, AI is automatically being applied, and it provides you with simple results that they've used AI by scouring the internet, scouring text, right? And that's the answer that you get, right? We see this in smart devices and such as smartphones. We see this in the Siri, right? If you have an iPhone, the Siri program that you talk to, right? You ask for directions, you ask for weather, right? It tells you in real time. Same thing with devices such as Alexa. You're inputting it information, asking questions, and it gathers data from the internet, from different points, right? It's also available in we see this in different applications, such as work applications. I'll go over that during this presentation as well. And also in the creative fields, right? We see this a lot, as people mentioned, through images, through film, short videos, writing, right? It's taking over and replacing, has replaced already a ton of fields, right? And that's the fear, right? That's the fear of AI, right? So it's both, a very positive, right? But it can also have very negative effects, right, on our work, on our lives. And it definitely has infiltrated all aspects of technology and some that we haven't even thought of yet. So let's go into the types of AI models. I'm going to just be going over 3 different models. Feel free to take notes, but I definitely wanted to make these as simple as possible for all of you. And this is the way that I made it so that you can remember it better, right? So machine learning. What is machine learning? It's an algorithm that uses inputted data to train a model, and that model will analyze the data and make predictions and patterns. And that trained model or algorithm can make predictions based on the data that it has seen before, right? So you think of a program, an algorithm, you provide it data, it creates a model or rules, right? And then it gives you something on your end, right? I've already talked about this as an example, but Siri and Alexa is definitely a simple um, example of this where it answers questions. You can set reminders, controls smart home devices, right? It's taking all this data that you tell it, and then it's giving it to you back based on your um, suggestions, questions, things like that, right? Um, what it's happening now is that they're using, or these companies are using the data, and specifically Siri or Alexa, to predict the type of services or products that you want based on past prompts, right? So this is kind of where we see a lot of that happening, right? In as an example, right, of companies using machine learning in a simple way. And a more complex way of using machine learning is through, let's say, for example, sales data, right? We can see this if a company wants to predict, excuse me, future sales of its data, right, based on current data, right? Um, it can also identify patterns, based on different all sorts of things, right? Weather patterns based on time of year, based on type of product, right? So you see this more with predictive models, and you see this with a lot of companies, right? I don't know. There's a lot of different specific programs out there that can be used and are used by various companies. For example, Walmart, Amazon, and Starbucks, they use AI, for example, for inventory management, and they can demand prediction, and so they're able to decrease some of their excess inventory, when to buy more products, when to not buy more things, right? So this is a very common example of AI model and machine learning, and I will go into um, some of the more products towards the end. Okay. Any questions? And I see some questions here. Let me see.
Julian, there's a question in the Q&A.
Okay.
They're asking, does AI only use its training data to produce its answers, or does it access anything on the internet?
Yes. So very good question. So it does both. So some of these models, right, when you think of, for example, ChatGPT, it was first trained on some of that information that it was given from the company that made it, OpenAI, right? And based off that information, it's able to learn and better predict the answers that it gives you. So it does access things on, and others do scour the internet as well. ChatGPT does now scour the internet. Like we saw in that first news article, that a lot of public sites, such as libraries, not us, but other libraries that have open information, they're just being bogged down by AI bots that are gathering that information so that they can use when you ask it for a prompt through different programs and things like that. So um, yeah, hopefully that answered your question. So yes. Let me see, somebody asks this, does AI is tracking us without our consent? That's a possibility, right? It just depends what you're using. If you have an Alexa, if you have Siri, that's one of the things that you can take off in your system options, right? And I know that was a big, right, concern and fear when people used, and when Alexa first came out, right? Remember, are they listening to us and things like that? And sometimes yes, sometimes no. It just depends what kind of options you put on there, because you can tell it um, to not listen to you, right? But AI specifically, is it tracking us? I mean, if you're using the internet, if you're browsing things like that, definitely. If you're using a browser, that's something that you have to agree to when you use and download these things, right? And so um short answer is yes, but you know does that should you be fearful of that? That's really up to you, right? It just depends on how your information is being used on the back end, right? So let me go ahead and answer that. Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and move on. Oh, here's another good question. Will AI be able to predict behavior a la Minority Report? I think it's already doing that in, for example, the machine learning through, for example, sales data, right? Um, Actually, oh, I'm gonna move on so I can kind of show you that example so I can kind of bring it back because that's a very good question. Another type of AI model is deep learning. So there's two different types. There's discriminative AI, which is um, a type of learning that mimics artificial neural network, which is essentially we're training this model to think like human brains neural network, right? Sounds scary, right? But um, this is what it does. So if you, for example, that I'm going to use is to describe discriminative AI is you assign labels to pictures for to keep it simple and to differentiate between objects, things, animals, and people. We're gonna think of a banana. This is the example that when I was searching, that would always use. So, we can assign that the model, whenever it sees a picture of banana, we assign the label as banana, right? And when we also give it pictures of an apple, right, we assign the label apple, right? So that the model understands the differences between one or the other, right? And when we give it another picture, let's say of an apple, it knows that it's an apple, right? So these things are pretty, um, I wouldn't say basic, but um, simple in that they use this type of training on a small scale, right? When we think about it in real terms, right? How is this being utilized daily? We think about it in our emails, right? Our emails automatically now are able to identify spam versus non-spam emails, and now there's different tabs of, your emails automatically go to spam, right? But of course, we see errors in this all the time, right? We send emails here at the library, and our emails end up in spam folder for whatever reason, right? We don't know. Whatever that algorithm is doing, it's not doing correctly. It thinks we're spam. Maybe it's just a company, right, or something, right, and things like that, right? Another way that we see this is through image recognition software, right? It uses advanced discriminative AI, a label, right? It labels people and different things and all kinds of stuff, right? But it's not giving us anything, it's not creating anything. It's just using this specific task to do things, right? So that's one example of deep learning. Another example of deep learning is generative AI, which learns patterns and creates new images, right? So a lot of people said, um, AI images and all that stuff in videos. This is exactly what it is, generative AI. So in this sense, when we think of that is not only do we assign labels to it, but for an example, um, the data set will learn patterns on its own. So let's say, for example, we do not give the program the label of an apple, but it knows that apples are red. It notices that they're round, that they have a stem, right? And so when we input into the program, provide me with the red apple, right? It will generate an apple based on the different characteristics, patterns, and things like that, right? So this is exactly what I did. I went into ChatGPT. I said, give me a picture of a red apple, and this is what it gave me, right? Pretty spot on, but this is fake image, right? So that's pretty amazing, right? And so the data has in the last 10 to 15 years, AI has really increased and progressed at such a rapid level that we don't know what's real and what's not real, right? This is not a real apple. But if you were to show that to somebody, they would, they would swear that it is a real apple, right? So, anyways, this is what the the type of algorithms that generative AI uses, right? It relies on patterns and data to create images. So generative AI, right? It's using a form of discriminative AI, right, by labels and all that, but it's also creating its own to give to the user, right? You also see this in a lot through customer service. You see this through advanced chatbots. You see this through healthcare, where they're accelerating drug discoveries. You see this a lot in finance, where they're enhancing fraud detection, not necessarily generating images, but at least the technology being used. They can identify and let you know when there's anomalies in transactional data. I'm sure all of us have received that, text, someone is using, someone has created a a weird transaction, is this really you, right? That's AI working behind the scenes, right? Okay, answer that one. So a lot of different technologies being used from deep learning, and it's definitely from generative AI, right? I'm going to go ahead and look at the Q&A. I know there's a lot of questions coming in. Let's see what I can answer. Oh, Denise, that's a good question. She asked, is AI not grabbing an image of an apple from somewhere? Instead, it's creating an image based on what it has learned? Correct. So, I believe in the beginning it would use, right? You think of what what Google used to be, right? It used to be you put in, give me an image of an apple, and it would give you an image of an apple of somebody, of that image that somebody had taken, right? Somebody had created a drawing, a picture, maybe a video, right? But now it's using all of that information, and it's also creating an image of an apple. Um, whether for good or bad, right? So that's just the technology that it's used, right? And so I'm not going to go into some of the, the fears and all that stuff, and whether it's good or bad. I will save that for another presentation. But that's something that you have to think about when you use these programs, right? Do I want it to generate something that may not be real, and can I use that, right? So that's something that goes into like copyright infringement and things like that. Like, where does this image come from? Where does, and you think about that more when it's more like writing, when it's um, content creation as well, right? Things like that. Very good question. I'm going through the chats as well. Okay, I'm gonna move on. Very good questions. So another type of AI model that's used specifically by some of the things that we're going to talk about today are large language models. These are powerful language models made to understand and generate human-like text. These models are trained to answer questions, summarize text, translate languages, and generate creative content. These are very common in chatbots. So if you've gone on, most companies now have a chatbot where it says, how can I help you? And it's a little drop down, a window pops up and it's a picture of someone, right? But most likely it's not somebody, right? And you can interact with it based on questions, and it will respond to you based on your what questions you want, right? We see this a lot, let's say, in car dealerships, right? On our website, are you interested in, you know, um, buying this vehicle? So you can ask it a lot of questions, and it's just taking that information. Maybe very simple, right? It may be just taking that information from a specific page that they have, right? That's only for that company, right? Um, it's also in content creation, right? We've kind of talked a little bit about that, and language translators. So they're using this technology and this model for that. And we can see this in ChatGPT, which some of you I'm sure are familiar with, Claude, and also Gemini. Okay, let's go ahead and move on. And I want to show you an example of different examples of AI programs that are popular today. These are not, there are tons out there, but these are just some of the more popular ones: ChatGPT, Claude, Copilot, and Gemini. So most of these you can use for free. You just need to have um, an email address, and most of the time you may need to have a phone as well. This is what I encountered. That this was my first time using these AI programs, and that's what I kind of ran into a lot, especially if you wanted to save some of your conversations, if you wanted to keep going back to maybe an image that I created or things like that, right? These are the things that kept, were almost like a requirement. So I can't really suggest anything, but I really recommend that all of you, go out there and really try using these programs and see for yourself which one works for you. Okay, somebody asked that in the chat. So ChatGPT, this is a generative AI chatbot, which was developed by OpenAI. This uses natural language processing to engage in conversations and generate human-like text, including articles, summaries, and more. So let's go ahead and bear with me. I am going to share my screen. We're going to do a live demo of ChatGPT.
Mhm.
This is what ChatGPT looks like. This is the web version. I know that you can also download it on your phone or mobile device. Um, I did sign in, so that gives me a couple more options for using it. As I mentioned earlier, ChatGPT is good for a lot of different things, right? So I'm going to go ahead and just type out, show you an example of what it can do, right? So I'm looking at, let's say, for example, a workout plan, exercise, right? And in the next presentation, we will talk about tips and tricks on how to use this specific program so that you can get better answers. So for now, I'm just going to go through and just do an example. So a home workout for 3 months um, without exercise equipment um, for a 30-year-old. Okay, I'm not 30, but let's say for this prompt I am. So here we go. So this is awesome, right? It gives you this information, and the more data points, inputs that you tell the program, the better the output's going to be, right? This is what we will be teaching all of you in the next class. But it gives you a really great, well, we'll see if it's great, right? Um, Workout plan for different days. It tells you the first month, day one, day two, right? First strength basics, cardio, mobility, cool. The second month, day one, tells you what to repeat. You don't have to have any equipment, things like that, right? And so what's difference between this and something that used to be just a Google search, years ago, is that it's getting this information from the internet, so it is scouring the internet, right? But this specific information may or may not have been published, or may not be somebody else's direct information, right? It's gathering from so many different data points that what it just provided me is its own recommendation on the prompt, sorry, that I gave it, right? We can also define it more, right? Um, which is cool. You can print it, you can share it, you can do a bunch of stuff, right? You can tell your personality. Do I like this personality? No, right? It's like, oh, that's kind of weird, right? Thank you for your feedback. What does that mean, right? Can you, you can actually give it a personality. Can you make this person more, let's say, angry with the prompt? Let's see what it gives me. Oh, do the workout from before. There we go. See, so now it gives you no excuses home workout plan. You're 30, you're not old, you're not broken, you don't need a gym, you need discipline. Let's go, right? So that's really interesting how you're able to even alter the um, personality of this program, right? Of this specific plan, right? So It also changes it a little bit, right? Gives you how many minutes, makes it seem easier, right? And this is funny, right? This plan doesn't care about your excuses, your bad sleep, your long day, or your mood. Show up, do the work, no gym, no problem. Just don't quit, right? So that's just one example of ChatGPT. You can also use Sora, which are pictures. I can just show you, but you do have to be over 18 for this because it does, some of the pictures are explicit. Just giving you a warning. Hopefully they're not here. Okay, yeah, I did explore this earlier today and this week, and you are able to ask it for images right down here. But what I learned is that some of the images do take a while, do take a little bit of time, right? I think I did put like librarian and I put like Apple. And so it gives you some images, right? Here's my Apple example. I think I did cats. On a coffee break, I want to just kind of see what it gives you, right? So that's an example of ChatGPT. I definitely recommend you kind of just go in there and do your own prompting just to get a good idea of the types of responses and information that you receive, right? Let me go back to the presentation. Bear with me. Okay, so another program that's really popular is Claude. This is similar. It's a family of large language models that functions as a chatbot and an AI assistant. Claude is popular because it's designed to assist with various tasks, mainly writing, coding, customer support, and information retrieval. Doesn't mean that ChatGPT can't do these things, but these specific things are what Claude um, is used for. As I mentioned earlier, if you do go in and try to use these, they will ask you for what type of plan you want to do, right? I just chose the free one, right? But if you pay for the Pro or the Max, they give you more options, right? That's just what most of these are now. And what's interesting is that when you first start with Claude, it asks you the type of topic that you want to explore. So I chose writing and content creation, life stuff, design and creativity. These are just from what they offered me, right? Let's go ahead and go out and we can um, demo Claude right now. So we can do a chat. And what's interesting is that they can create whole paragraphs, right, of story text, right? So let's make a story, oh, about a librarian who goes to space, right? Is that about me? Maybe. Let's see. And it does it really quick, right? Oh, I forgot to say, keep it short, right? It's going to give me a really long answer. Oh no, right? So this obviously helps, may or may not help, writers, right? But again, some of this information may or may not come from a published article. It may have gotten it from a bunch of different sites and just kind of, but it is making its own story, right? Again, we run into issues with copyright. We don't know where this came from, specifically, right? That's a lot of the challenges of AI that's currently going on, right? Uh, Let me see. So this is kind of a short story. Let me see. Can you make this prompt shorter? Let's say one paragraph. And I apologize, I'm not looking at the chat right now, but if there's good questions, please let me know. Oh, sorry about that. There we go. Okay, so I made it one really long paragraph. Captures. See, so on the left side, it kind of tells you what it did, right? It tells you like stream of consciousness, right? It tells you like the content, not only the content, but the theme and different writing style, right? You can even say that. So there's a ton of different use cases for Claude. Um, I'm sure people use it all the time. But again, you do run into issues of plagiarism, right? Students, I'm sure, use this, and now professors have been, using these prompts and putting in, they have their own programs, and most universities have their own program where they input, papers and to see if it's been written and copied from AI, right, or ChatGPT, right? And again, you go run into more issues with those because sometimes um, those papers, may have been, um, written by someone, but then it shows up as AI, right, or copyrighted or things like that. So, a lot of issues that are coming up, right? Let me go back to the present. So another program that's really popular and utilized is the Microsoft Copilot. This is an AI companion that's designed to boost productivity and creativity by helping with various tasks, including writing, coding, searching, and more. And if you download the Microsoft 365 app, you're able to use this program to create graphs. It's able to look at you know, all your files, whether that's Excel, Word. You can tell it to, scrape different themes and different projects together and show you, and it's all kinds of things that you can do. I won't be simulating this one today, but feel free to go in and test this one out. The last one I want to talk about is Gemini. This is part of Google's AI chatbot and can understand and respond to text, code, images, audio, and video. This is very similar to Copilot. It can also access Google's other products such as Gmail and Google search engine, etc. So if you use Google a lot and you save a lot of files to your Google Drive, you can utilize and help it make graphs, or make it help documents, or look at all your documents that you created and summarize based on theme, topics, things like that, right? So I'm just going to show you what Gemini looks like as a web version. Again, I'm going to go see the live demo. So again, this can give you different things. So I can say explain something, right? Explain how the Earth rotates. Something something random, right? Let's see what it gives us. Right. So, this is information. Here we can see it actually tells you where it got this information from, right? Because it is using and incorporating, you know, essentially Google, right? The search engine, which is good to know, right? If you're using this information. Same thing, right? NASA Earth Observatory from Climate, Penn State University, right? It also gives you YouTube, right? Obviously, because Google owns YouTube, so it's gonna offer those different services for you, right? Of a video that somebody has created. So this video is not AI, right? It did take it from YouTube specifically that somebody created, right? And it provides sources, right? So that's really interesting that you do see that, right? Maybe in the past, a couple years, maybe it wouldn't create sources, but now they do, right? So um, that's kind of interesting, right? If you are using it on your phone, you can utilize it through the use of microphone as well. Some of the other ones you can as well, ChatGPT as well. And so people use it all the time if you prefer someone to, narrate what those prompts and that information will be. Okay. So that is Gemini. Let's go back to the presentation. So there's some other resources um, that I looked at when creating this presentation. Here at the library, we have something called LinkedIn Learning. Hopefully, all of you are familiar with it. This is a database that we purchase and we pay for that's free. It includes expert instructors, high quality videos, transcripts, and course material. And there's no limit to how many classes that you can take. And it's totally free as long as you have an LA County Library card. If you go into um, the classes, this is what the portal or the dashboard looks like in LinkedIn Learning from a web version. I typed in artificial intelligence, and these are the different videos that came up. Essentially, they're classes in video form. Here to tell you, the whole course is 2 hours and 26 minutes for this first one, Introduction to Artificial Intelligence, and it tells you when it was created and published. There's also short versions of it, right? What is artificial intelligence? That's 41 seconds, right? That is just maybe like the intro of their class, right? And so these are free. Again, I highly recommend you continue your educational journey if you want to continue learning about artificial intelligence, and especially if you wanted to learn specifically about a certain topic, right? So, for example, here's one that's very niche and specific: artificial intelligence for cybersecurity, right? Or artificial intelligence and business strategy, right? So they have a ton of videos, very specific, right? Very technical, that may be um, more better viewed for some of you who wanted maybe more of an advanced presentation. Okay. Our next AI topics will be, we're going to have three more um, in the next few months, one a month. The next one is going to be how to use AI prompts. And that's going to be on Wednesday, August 20th. Same time, 4 to 5. I'm going to have Selenia drop the link. She did. Thank you so much. The registration in the chat. This time we will be going over, one of my colleagues and I will be presenting on how to better use and effectively use your inputs to create the prompt that you want so that you can get better questions, or sorry, better answers to your questions, right? There's so much that AI can do. I believe we'll be using ChatGPT for this one. And that way you can, now that you have somewhat of an understanding, a baseline of, what AI is, how it's used in the real world, right? You can, we can give you some best practices on how to use a prompt, right? Because it does take some learning, right? And there's so much that it can do. That you know I hope that people want to use it, who attended this, who've attended this program, want to use it, right? But you won't know until you actually get in there, right? So yeah. And the next one after that, sorry, in September, will be the pitfalls and positives of AI. I didn't go into too much of that in this presentation, but we will go and talk about, some of the threats to create the creative industry that's ever changing, right? Especially here in LA, that's very prominent. The dangers of AI use, we see that already with what's on the internet and fake, like someone mentioned earlier, fake news, fake images, fake videos, right? But also the positives, right? We hope that this, just like anything that we've created as as a as a um, as a human race, this, hopefully we use it for the positive, right? And how can we use it to better work, be better creatively, and so on. So I'm going to go ahead and open it now for questions. We always leave about, 10 to 15 minutes for questions. I'll do my best to answer questions. Again, but I'm not an expert. And I know that some of my colleagues can also jump in if they feel they have the answers. Somebody asked, how do we get free LinkedIn Learning? If you go to our website, actually, I'll have Selenia um, drop in the link. But if you go to our website, LA County Library, you can click on Learn, and you can access LinkedIn Learning. So that is a free resource if you want to visit and take classes on and learn more about AI, not only AI, but other technical topics as well. And it's a free resource, very expensive. So, we paid for it already. So it is free to anyone who has a LA County Library card. Okay. Uh, Somebody asked, what did you do for the first picture you showed us? I'm assuming that was the apple. So that I used ChatGPT. I went to they call it Sora. It's their image creation tab, and I just typed in, show me a picture of a red apple with a stem, right? And it gave me, I think, two different pictures that it created on its own. So, um, really interesting. There's all kinds of stuff out there. But definitely, go in and see, mess around with it a bit. Ooh, somebody asked a really good question. I don't have the answer to that, but I will, be glad to answer that in a future one. Can you talk about the energy consumption and environmental impact of AI? Wow, that's a really great question. We'll take that question for our next presentation. I love that question. Thank you, Brian. Ooh, somebody has another good question. What if you were to open an AI startup in your garage in 2026, what particular area would you focus to maximize your chances for longevity? Oh, wow. That's a really higher level question. I don't know. But from what I've seen, I know that, um, if you're thinking of, let's say, maybe not starting up your own AI startup, right? Let's say you just want to be an expert in AI. A lot of companies now are hiring AI experts, to enhance their products, to um, sell more things, right? Whatever that is, there's so much going on in AI, right? That becoming an expert, and there's obviously different ranges of what an expert means, right? If I watch a couple of videos, that makes me an expert? Not really, right? It just depends on what the company is looking for, right? Things like that, right? Um, so, um, yeah, I mean, that's at least from what I've seen on job postings and things like that. And maybe we'll talk about, AI careers in AI. That's a definite possibility in terms of what we can present on as well. Somebody's asked if there's any certificates for the whole series of AI training. I think LinkedIn Learning does provide you with the certificate. Correct me if I'm wrong, Selenia or um, Oleg on that. I know that some of our other databases that are free do provide you with a certificate of completion once you finish all the videos, but whether or not you can get credit for that in your employment, that's a different
Yeah,
question.
that's something that folks would have to check with their own HR or their own professional organization.
Yes. Schedules. What would be good for schedules? An AI program that can create schedules. I believe you can use ChatGPT for that. I mean, if you already have a schedule of um, what you want specifically, it all depends on what information you provide that program, right? You can input and you can upload a schedule, right? Let's say my schedule, my wife's schedule, and tell it, what's um, the best times available that we are not open, right? That we're open, right? I can see, with Copilot, kind of does it already when I'm trying to schedule a meeting with some of my coworkers, right? It's using some of that AI, I want to, technology to make that decision, right? And it's doing it really quickly, right? But I know that's something that you could do, let's say for different schedules and things like that. But definitely, mess around with it to see what it comes out. But for the next program webinar, we will be going into, best practices for prompts and things like that. Diana said, my experience with AI has been that as soon as I enter a query, that generates a flood of solicitation emails to me, almost all of which are completely useless, but which keep on coming ad nauseum. How can that be stopped? Oh, that's interesting. We will go over, best practices in the next presentation so that when you do enter a query, maybe it's the program that you're using. I'm not sure. But most of the programs that we went over today are free to use, right? Um, Obviously, you can pay if you want the more advanced options, but at least the ones that I went over are free to use, as long as you have an email and phone number. Christina had a really good question. Do you think AI will affect the population to lessen their critical thinking? I think that has been a question from, ever since the internet was created, right? If we can find something so easily, will we know? Will we be able to think critically? I think it just depends on the user, right? If the more people are using AI, maybe our critical thinking will go down, but I hope that people, learn. to see secondary sources, third sources and things like that, right? Don't just take what's given to us as fact, right? We'll go over that, over the pitfalls of AI, right? That's a really good question. Who knows? I hope not. Hope we're still able to think critically, right? Even with more technology. Oh, that's a good question. Somebody asked, are ATMs AI? ATMs do not typically have AI built in. Correct. Thank you, Oleg. All right. It's coming up to the end of the presentation. I want to thank you all for coming and hearing me talk about the introduction to AI concepts. Again, we will be sending out this presentation, the recording, and the slides in the next few days. Please join us for our next one on Wednesday, August 20th, sorry, from 4 to 5. We will be going over, best practices for AI prompts. Thank you so much, and take care.